everyone. Either good morning or good afternoon or whatever time of day you're watching this. First, just thank you all so much for your prayers, for your encouragement, and for just loving me and supporting me and encouraging me. It's amazing. I really love everyone's support as I'm out here on the road. Now it's been almost 3 weeks, a little over 2.5 weeks. So it's definitely been fun, but challenging at the same time, and learning a lot as I go. I was in New York City the last couple days, so I'll post and share about that with an amazing woman of God that I met through another amazing woman of God. Just amazing how God's bringing people together, and seeing just his goodness and his faithfulness, and just how wonderful he is so much fun. I just wanted to take some time to share more about what God's doing, because I've shared a lot of the fun, adventures and things that I've seen, and there's been little things sprinkled here and there, but I just want to really highlight kind of from the beginning to where I'm at now. And the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the first night of my trip. I shared about staying in Seattle kind of peninsula area, and how that came to be because of a conference I was at, and because God led me to honor a couple amazing women who have been incredible leaders in the faith for a long time, and then was honored to stay with them for a night as I passed through on my way to Canada. And what I saw God do was so amazing. Getting to spend some time and see joy restored in one amazing lady that was created to live full of joy, but her experience and the circumstances lately had not been full of joy, and it was just a difficult season. And seeing God restore joy that wasn't just an hour or for the day, that I've heard reports of it being a lasting joy that has sustained. And it's just so amazing to see what God's doing, and to see it firsthand, and then to hear about just the continuation of joy, and in his graciousness and in his mercy, just restoring that. So that was amazing. Then another big highlight was actually being in Montana with my friend who I met also at another conference last year, and we've gone to a few conferences now, and she's from the same town as another friend of mine, and so it's fun, these small world connections I love so much. And so I went to my friend's church in Kalispell, Montana, and it just felt like home. It felt like the same pursuit of Jesus, and the same love and same just heart that the church carried, a heart for God and a heart for people, was so amazing, and just felt so free to worship. My friend said, you're free to worship here however you desire, and had an incredible encounter with the Lord. Saw this amazing picture of the pastor and how he is leading his church like a true shepherd, shepherding the flock, and even those who are uncertain or not really sure, they're kind of on the fence, that he's just lovingly pulling them in, and leading them to the Father. It was so beautiful, and just to have a chance to honor the pastor and his wife, and what they're doing, and their heart for Montana. And they have a vision of Montana being a ripple effect through the whole country of what God's heart is for the nation. So it was awesome just to agree with what they are hearing from the Lord, and to see how my friend's church really is honoring the Father and loving on people really well. Super cool. I went up into, actually the day before I was at that church, I was in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and went to the church of the pastor. His name's Artur Pawlowski, the one who was arrested during COVID for having his church open and letting people come to church. So I went to his service, and they actually had a guest speaker from Montana. So that was kind of funny. And there was some things that I didn't really agree with, and some good stuff in there. And it just reminded me again how anytime you are hearing a message or someone speaking, that there's going to be meat and there's going to be bones, and just that biblical principle of we chew the meat and we spit out the bones. And if there's a lot of bones, that's okay. We just spit them out, and like we ask God for that discernment of what we can actually chew on and hold on to and receive, and what do we need to actually just release and let go of and not receive, and that's okay, and to bless that person. So it was just a really good reminder of how God can still be moving and working through people and through churches that are still he's still working on them too. He's working on all of us. We're all in a process with the Lord. We're all in a different place in our healing and our maturity with the Lord, and that's okay. So it was great reminder of that, being up there. Next, I think it's good to just share how God's providing for me, random things. Someone went to a gas station late at night and told the cashier about my journey and where I was going, and so they let me have some coffee from the convenience store for free. That was really cool. People have just given me food for free on the road, and I'd stopped somewhere and they were about to close, so I bought dinner and then they just threw in some extra food for me. So fun stuff like that. And then on my way to Toronto, I stayed with an aunt of one of my good friends in Minneapolis, and it was so sweet, and I just love how welcoming people have been, that I'm just passing through, and they've just been able to catch a little snippet of my journey and what God's doing, and I felt so blessed and so honored for people to open up their home to me. So that has been really amazing, just the favor of the Lord and the provision, how He's provided and taken care of me it's been really amazing. And then Toronto, so I went to the church where it's merged. I posted on my stories and mentioned where the Toronto blessing happened. That was in the 90s, I want to say, maybe 2000s. I'm not sure exactly the years, and I didn't actually know a whole lot about it. I just heard a couple things, and people said oh, you're going to be in Canada, you should go to the Toronto Blessing Church. So I went, and also this Canadian church had a guest speaker from the States, so it was really funny. Daniel Kalenda is he leads a ministry called CFAN, Christ for All Nations. So he was there guest speaking. That was really awesome. Really good message about obedience and just following what God says without delay, without hesitation. And it was spot on, I felt for this trip, that I'm on. But it was just funny, going to 2 Canadian churches, and both of them happened to have guest speakers from the States. so yeah, it was just really cool. But I met a young kid there that's in their ministry school, and so he was asking me about the trip and what God's doing, and it was fun just to connect with him, because he's Canadian and hasn't heard about like a lot of the churches in the States that are really incredible, and so getting to share with him was really cool. What happened after that? Toronto. I think I went straight, that's when I went to Ottawa and then Montreal. And it was actually really, really interesting being in Ottawa, which is the capital city of Canada altogether. So kind of like DC for the States is Ottawa for Canada. And they were having like a protest kind of there where Parliament is, which would be like the White House in the States. And I learned a lot about what is going on politically in Canada, things that you don't hear about in the States at all, and talked with a couple people. It was just very eye-opening just to see like the darkness, I guess, that is over Canada, and just the not good things that have happened and that are happening in Canada. And the Lord just reminded me that He loves Canada, and that He still has plans, amazing plans for Canada and the people of Canada. And so it was an awesome opportunity to be in their capital city and to be able to bless Canada and bless the people and agree with what God's doing and God's plans for Canada, not with what the enemy's doing, but agreeing with what God's doing and what He says over Canada. And just spent some time journaling about what I had learned, and then just heard like that God has so much for Canada, that I just to speak joy. Like if anyone wants to partner with what God's doing, just to speak joy over Canada, to speak hope over Canada, to speak the truth over Canada and life. That was a big thing I saw and heard about. A lot of suicide and murder and just really dark things happening. And so I just was declaring life. So if you want to join with that and be part of what I'm partnering with God in over Canada, is just life. Declare life, that people will live, that they will be free from addiction. I saw a lot of addiction, drug use and stuff just out in the open on the streets. But we can declare that Canada will be free from addiction, from bondage, and from suicide and death, that Canadians will live in Jesus' name. So that's a lot of the Canada stuff. Then I came down into, I guess I drove through a lot of like upstate New York in the dark. Let me share a funny story actually. So before Toronto, I was driving through Detroit and Chicago, and then Detroit. And then Detroit is where I actually went back into Canada, and I went through the border, and that has been my third time at that point going into Canada. So I knew what they were going to ask, so I had all my answers ready, and the guy was like, okay, well, give me a couple minutes. And he closes the little door and comes back and says, he hands me a slip and says, I need you to go to that other area over there, park, and then meet up with officers over there. And I was like, okay. And so I go over there, and I get out of my car, and I'm talking to one of the officers, and they say, well, we're going to search through everything in your vehicle just to make sure, everything that you said at the gate, you said you don't have any guns or alcohol or drugs or anything that they don't want in their country. they're like, we just need to make sure. I was like, okay, that's fine. And so they start going through all my stuff, and the officer that's standing with me is asking me questions, like he's trying to make regular conversation with me. And I noticed that as they're going through things, they're literally opening up everything. And I noticed one of the officers opens up my journal, and I was like, oh wow. He's like opening it and reading it like for a good probably 30 seconds to a minute. And I was like, oh wow, he's actually reading my journal. She goes, yeah, I'm sorry, like we just have to go through everything, and just in case there's anything suspicious. I was like, that's okay, you know, all I journal about is Jesus, so if he's never met Jesus, maybe he'll meet him today. She was like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe, that's awesome. So that was just like a funny little thing. And of course, you know, there's nothing bad in my car, so I wasn't worried. And then they asked me about like my plans, why I'm in Canada, and how long I plan to be in Canada. So I got to tell them about my trip and about how I felt God call me out to do this, and I'm gonna be on the road for 6 months and all this stuff. And they're like, wow, really, you know, that's really cool, and like what kind of church are you a part of, and asking more questions about that. So it was just like an awesome time just to share like all the fun aspects of like what God's doing. And then they like opened up my purse and saw that I had like all the plans for my trip and like a calendar of when I plan to be certain locations. And so the guy was like, oh, this is really good. When you go into the next step of the process, make sure you show them this, because that'll prove that you're just passing through. And they said the reason why we stopped you is because we're worried that you might want to live here because your car is full of stuff. I was like, oh, I get it. Like I'm like, did I really look suspicious? I drank a lot of caffeine that day. Did I look like, you know, I wasn't sober? Like there was some kind of problem? And they're like, well, no, just when people come through with a lot of luggage and personal stuff, it looks like they're moving here. And so when you said you're just going to be here for a few days and go back in the States, you know, we just want to make sure that that's truly what you're doing. I was like, oh, okay, I get it, that's fine. And so I go in, you know, they're done searching my car and they say everything's fine, but I have to go in to this little office and they're going to interview me. And I was like, oh man, I've seen all the shows. I've watched like border security shows just because it's interesting. And so I know they ask them, you know, lots of questions. They usually pat them down or go through like a security, like, you know, screening thing just to make sure they don't have any drugs on them. And so I go in and the guy, you know, immediately calls me up to the counter, and he just, you know, asked me a couple questions really fast, and then was like, okay, we'll have a seat and we'll call you back in a little bit. I was like, okay. And I'm expecting like the 3rd degree, you know, all these questions in a little room with a bright light and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't think, like, there's nothing suspicious. And I'm like, I think it's totally fine. So I was like, God, I just thank you that, like, and they had already, it'd already been like maybe 30 minutes or an hour. So it like put me behind in my traveling. But I was like, you know, God, it's okay. Thank you that I'm gonna be totally fine. Like, nothing's gonna happen to me. I'm not gonna have any, like, you know, fines or anything charged against me because you know, everything's fine. And so then like 30 seconds later, the guy comes back and he's like, hey, Stacy,